we're live. Back in studio today. Natalie Samson in the house. First woman on the podcast.
Honored.
I've been hearing all that shit you've been talking. All y'all. We got one in. Natalie Samson. Thanks for coming in, girl.
Excited to be here.
Drove up from SD.
Drove all the way up 2.5 hours.
How's the drive? What'd you listen to? Podcast or music?
Podcast.
Which one?
Podcast. Okay, so Christine Hassler. I like her podcast.
What's that about?
We're diving right
Christine
in.
Hassler?
Christine Hassler.
Yeah. Oh, that's how we do.
That's how
We
you
just
pronounce it.
swan dive right in.
We're swan diving
Word to
in.
Greg Louganis.
She came up with a lot of ideas I like. Her main thing is she talks about a concept called expectation hangover. So like basically,
I like this.
yeah, you a lot of, like humanity, like in general, we always like have expectations of the future.
Mm-hmm.
And then when it doesn't go exactly according to plan, we feel almost hungover, like physically sick. So that could be like in a relationship or in a job opportunity or like even like physical or emotional expectations for yourself.
Yeah.
And if it's not met, you feel like hungover. And so she like preaches that when we go through or when we go for our goals, we should always have like low attachment but high involvement. So it's like
Low attachment, high involvement.
so like don't be attached to the outcome, but go for it through action.
I love that.
So you like learn from whatever happens, but you're going in that
expectation
direction.
hangover.
Yeah.
I love that.
Dive right in.
Diving right in. No, I love that. So what's her podcast called?
I think it's the Christine Hassler like show, but
I feel her.
yeah.
And who is she? What's her background like?
I'm not even sure. I think she just like, I think with a lot of like great people, they had some like traumatic event, right?
Uh-huh.
And then they're like, we need to get our shit together.
Hey.
Something like that. Probably what happened, but I don't remember the exact story.
Cool. Got you. So we're in here drinking Boochcraft. Apparently, cheers. Thank you for coming. You know I appreciate you. Watermelon mint chili. That looked like
Hibiscus.
the most aggressive combination I've ever seen, but
Yeah, the
seasonal.
chili's light, though.
Seasonal.
Seasonal
Chili's light.
only.
Chili is light.
We like this flavor.
Chili is light. So yeah, what are you up to now these days, Samson?
Yeah, so I work at Sharp Hospital. Shout out. I work for genetic counselors, so I'm trying to be a genetic counselor ultimately.
What exactly is that?
Yeah,
you were explaining it to me a bit before, but yeah.
Okay, so basically there's a lot of areas of genetic counseling. There's like prenatal, there's cancer, I don't know. So I'm focused on cancer right now, which I didn't expect to get in, but I'm glad I'm in. So basically like people will come to us with a history, like a family history of cancer usually, or they're already diagnosed with cancer. And our job is to read their DNA and determine if they have a hereditary gene that might be causing that cancer. And so the point of that being, if they did, there's a lot of different options from there. Like treatment plans are set up with their primary doctor. So like say a woman has a ton of breast cancer in her family and she comes to us, she ultimately like gets tested. She has like the BRCA1 or 2 gene, which is like for breast cancer. Then her doctor will most likely suggest like surgery or like to a lesser extent, like be put on like cancer prevention drugs and get screenings often. So you catch it in stage 1 rather than stage 4.
So is that cancer mostly genetic or is it, so that's always my question. Like,
yeah,
if you're genetically prone to getting like what could you do to
yeah, that's huge. Yeah. So a lot of people think that. Also, like that being said, if you have the gene, it does not mean you're going to get cancer. And so like that's huge. Like that's a big misconception and it like causes a lot of depression if you don't understand that, right? And even if you do get cancer, like the point is like a treatment plan, a hope for a better future. Like what I've learned from it for the most part is like patients come to us and what they really want to like feel better is hope for a better future. And like you can relate that to like anyone, right? Like we all want that. That's like having our own goals and self-improvement. Like that's all just a hope for a better future. Like without that, it would be hard to get out of bed.
Yeah,
like, that's
just in life in
definition
general.
of depression, right? Yeah. So like in general, I think that's what is huge is like when they come to us, despite the answers, it's like we're giving them this like structured plan. So it's like they're back in control of their life. Because when you have cancer, or like you could even relate it to like when you're addicted to drugs, you feel like out of control of your life.
Yeah, no, for sure.
And so like this kind of like when you have control and humanity, you feel like way better about your life. Because when you're in a state of uncertainty, it's like scary, fucking freaking out all the time. You're like, I hate this. But when you have like a plan and a sense of control, you know, you're just like way more content and excited for the future to like, so especially with cancer patients, like giving them hope to fight for life. Because
so is that part of your job, like the genetic counseling? Like you give them that?
Yeah. So like, okay,
plan?
so say like a woman does have the gene. A lot of people will be like, well, isn't that depressing to have to tell them that? But it's actually the opposite, because what happens is like they come to us with a state of uncertainty and we're putting them in a position of certainty. So it's like, they're actually like excited to know answers. It's almost like you have like some shit going on in your body and you're like, I can't figure it out. No one's diagnosing me with the right like cause, whatever.
Yeah.
And that's more scary than knowing what's happening and figuring out how to deal with it. Right.
Got it.
So like, I think that even if they're positive, like for the gene for cancer, it's hard with children, but like for them, they're like, okay, like I can catch this early. Like I know what's going to happen in my future, or like for the most part I can like have control and some sense of hope for a better future than it would have gone down this other path if I hadn't have known.
Yeah.
So I don't know, it's interesting, like, and it is a heavy field. Like we do lose patients, which is hard.
Yeah, it's gotta be so rough.
Yeah. But I think like with that, providing like this, like you're almost like saving lives at the same time. I mean, that's extreme,
clearly.
but so like,
But you are.
Yeah,
right?
I mean, like it's kind of, I mean, also like with that whole hope and that idea is like you can change people's perspectives, which is huge too. And so like having that ability to change their life in a positive way, it kind of overpowers. Like
that's beautiful. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So.
definitely. So do they come to you after they've been diagnosed?
So it depends. So like they can come after they've been diagnosed, or like if their mom and aunt and like I don't know, sister all got diagnosed with breast cancer, then they'll come to us. But,
Okay.
Yeah.
Question. So my grandfather he died of colon cancer, maybe.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
Sorry if I'm getting that wrong, Dad. Yeah, let's say colon cancer. And so everyone tells me it skips a generation.
Oh,
like,
interesting.
I don't know why they tell me. Is there any merit to that?
I mean, it's super complicated. Like, I don't want to speak too much on it before I have my formal education on genetics.
I got you.
But like, I think that with a lot of cancers, it can vary. Like, there's something called Lynch syndrome, which can be a gene in your family, and it causes like a multitude of different cancers. But there's so many factors, like what age he was diagnosed at, like who, like blood relative, like a lot of factors. You kind of have to. Like, that's why it's, like, so important to see a genetic counselor rather than just get tested from a third party, in my opinion.
I didn't even know this was a thing.
Yeah,
okay.
yeah.
So you're completely, like, separate from the doctors then?
No, well, yes and no. Like, it's all kind of it's intertwined because the doctors have to refer to us. Otherwise, they can't see us.
Got it.
And then also, like, with insurance, it's all kind of, like, it's complicated, but... I mean, we do our own, like, we don't, like, listen to, I don't know, yeah. It's kind of separate.
I got you, yeah. And just bouncing off your point about, like, something to look forward to, like,
yeah.
I don't know if you watch Corey's podcast, but, he was, like, he had this crazy disease.
I was thinking of that.
Yeah, he had this crazy, and he's like, yo, man, like, I had to buy myself a truck, because, like, if I didn't have anything to look forward to, like, you know, like, I don't know what would have happened kind of thing. And
it's
like,
really interesting. So there's this, like, being in this field has made me analyze a lot about the idea of hope, because it's like you really see how much of a difference it can make when someone has it. And so there's another podcast.
plug them all.
Or like also a book. There's this guy named Mark Manson, and he wrote, you probably heard of it, The Art of Not Giving a Fuck.
Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck.
So he just came out with, he just came out with another book on hope. And he was talking about how, like, okay, so he had a bunch of these goals, like sell like 1 million copies of a book or something, like make this much money. And he said, like, all of a sudden he accomplished all his goals he ever had in his life. He woke up in his bed and he's like, I have no reason to get out of my bed. Like, fuck, like, what's the point, right?
Yeah.
So it's like you become a millionaire and you think that becoming a millionaire per se, like, will make all your problems go away. But then you wake up and you're like, well, what now? So like his argument is that you kind of, as humans, like we always have to strive for a better future and set goals and have self-growth and have this vision of ourselves like in a better position, or what's going to make us happy next, or how are we going to grow? Because otherwise it's like, and so then he talks about like, you have to love the process to get to that goal. Like, it's not just about like reaching the goal, right? So it's like all about being grateful for the process of how you're getting there and like setting new ones constantly.
No, 100%.
So like I can definitely see that, especially with cancer patients, because it's like if they don't have that idea of like, we're going to get through this and we're going to have like things to look forward to, then it's like they just set a deadline, especially when doctors, right? Like Corey even said, like when a doctor says like, you have this long to live, how that like functions with your mental state and then how that functions like with your physical body, like everything's going to give up. Yeah. So it's like, let's push away from that and be like, no, let's fight past that deadline, quote unquote.
I love that. Cause like we were talking about a bit before, but the mind is so fucking powerful.
Super important. Like, yeah. So yeah, like we were talking about crisis counseling, right?
Yep. Crisis counseling.
Yeah, crisis counseling. So I'm doing, I'm training right now to be a crisis counselor, which is like, I was saying, it's like people will call in or text in and say, like, it can be like less extreme to like, I'm feeling really sad lately, or it can be extreme of like, I want to commit suicide. Like talk me, you know, like, what do I do?
You're like a hotline.
Yeah, it's a hotline. Yeah. So
that's so heavy, girl.
Yeah. So it's been really crazy, like learning with the training. It's so much training.
Yeah.
But like one thing they say is that when someone's in the midst, when they're clouded by this, like they're just super mentally clouded and they're in this situation where they're like, I want to kill myself right now. The biggest tactic is to focus on something in the future that they can look forward to, or a loved one that like is in the future. It's all about in the future, right? Future. So it's like, say they like, for example, this is heavy, but like someone calls in, an example was a man called in. He was like, I want to kill myself. Tell my son I love him. The tactic would be like, tell me about your son. What are you going to do with him next week? You know? So it's like getting them out of that state where they're like, shit, like I can't give up now. Like I have this to look forward to in the future.
Right. But for you, like, I'm just thinking for you, like,
yeah.
You're the last line of,
I know. Yeah.
It's so crazy.
Yeah. So, one thing they actually teach in the training is that you are like, it's mandatory to have an hour of self-care before and after your shift.
And what does that mean, self-care?
Yeah, so it depends on like how you view it. So I have a supervisor, quote unquote, and like I have to tell her what my self-care is going to be. So like say like for me, it was like I'm going to do yoga and meditate and like, you know, focus on like get back to myself, because a lot of times when you're doing this help, you're like so invested in the other person that like you can literally, especially being like when you're empathetic, you can literally be like, I feel their pain so much that it can affect you so much. Like you can't, like, especially because shifts are at night, because that's when the most calls are. So my shifts would be like right before bed. So like I don't know how I'd be able to sleep if, you know, like if something bad happened. But for the most part, like nothing bad happens. But either way, like you have heavy conversations. So like they kind of require you to have self-care so that your mental state is okay before and after. Otherwise, like how are you going to help? It's like that quote, like you can only like help when your cup is fully full from the overflow, right?
Right.
Because you can't like help anyone when your cup's empty /
You're like, preaching to me right now. Yeah, no, I love that. But it's like, because if you come in like not fully, like if you come in a bad attitude to that, like
like how are you supposed to help them if you're like mentally not okay?
I just feel like that's a lot of pressure on you, know? Like why do you ask for this? That's crazy, girl.
I know, yeah. I think it is a lot of pressure, but it's also like how good you feel after when you are helping someone, right? And like I don't know, it's like it's something like what comes to mind is like nothing worth it is easy, or whatever that quote is, right? So like when you're helping someone, there's a lot of risk, but also a lot of benefit. Like you're not just like, I don't know, like helping them with a small task, you know, you're like saving a life. It's like so like heavy, but also like so rewarding, you know, in yourself that it's like worth it. But yeah, you definitely have to like take
that's inspiring for real, because like that's not an easy thing to go out and do. Like put your, I don't know, that's just so mentally taxing and like exhausting. It's got to be after you. Yeah. Like how many calls do you take a session? Like what's that?
So what I signed up for is like 1 shift a week. So I'll do like 4 hours in like on a Wednesday night, like, you know, 7 to 11 or whatever.
Yeah.
But I mean, you deal with like sometimes 2 people at once, like 2, you're like on like trying to handle 2 at once, and then the next hour it's the same thing, and like so it's just like kind of never ending, and you never know what you're gonna get. You could get someone that's just like, school is hard, help me, and you're like, all right, let's figure out an action plan to cope with anxiety and like figure out how you're gonna handle this, like. Or you could get someone like with like where you're gonna have an active rescue, like you never know, right? So it's like
an active rescue.
So like active rescues are like if it gets to the point where like they're actually like in danger, then you kind of have to get information out of them without like feeling like an interrogation, so that like police can go and help them, hopefully. But that's like 10%, so it's pretty low, I think. That actually happens.
10%.
I mean, yeah. I mean, it happens for sure. Like they train you like no other. Like it does happen, but So I mean, but it's been so cool. Like even just learning communication techniques.
No, for real.
Like with that.
Because a lot of people don't even know how to talk to, and sorry, I'm just bouncing all over the place. But like even in your own life, like when you get sad or when you get,
for sure,
you just be like, you're like, okay, like I know what I got to do. Like I gotta look forward. I got to plan.
Right. Like, yeah. And then there's so many other things about that. Like, so to begin with, you always want to like have validation and strength IDs. So like, say someone comes to you and they're like, I'm like overwhelmed, like I'm freaking out. Everything in my life is going wrong. Everyone hates me. So you start with like a validation, like it's totally normal to feel overwhelmed in your situation. So it's like, you're like, it's okay to feel this way. You're human, you know, like you're allowed to feel this way with all this shit going on. Yeah. So a lot of times, like as humans, we like try to, I don't know, we get upset ourselves when we're like okay, whatever, like this emotion isn't valid. And when you feel like the emotion's valid and you're like in acceptance, then you can work through it. Right.
Yeah. And that's, so like, sorry, but that's like like I was talking about this on my last podcast actually with Massive, but that's like like Mark Manson talks about in his book, The Negative Feedback Loop. When I feel like this. I know I shouldn't feel like this. Like, why do I feel like this? And it's just a crazy spiral.
Yeah. So like, so we like try to validate, and then strength IDs is like, you're really brave for coming and reaching out for help, because like you always want to, because it is huge. It's like hard. It's hard to be vulnerable and like show that like I need help. Right. But that's the only way you're going to like get out of position, is like actually admitting that and like being vulnerable. So like you start with that and you kind of like try to build rapport so that like you're in a trusting situation and you can like actually have them open up to you. Yeah. And like the whole goal by the end of it is to come up with an action plan so that they can like move forward and like lower their state of overwhelm or anxiousness or anger into a state of like, you know, just a better, even if it's one step up, like a better emotional state. So like you come up with a lot of coping mechanisms, like journaling or walking, you know, together with them. And then if they leave the chat having an action plan, then you're like, you can end the conversation. So it's like a whole process, but I've learned so much about it too. I'm like, I can handle problems now when people come to me in my own. Like
that is so heavy. Yeah, like you're a fucking angel for doing that. I didn't know you did all that.
Well, I just started actually like last month, but it's like it's a lot with my job too, with cancer, but I think like ultimately, it's made me learn so much too, like
about yourself too. I bet,
and life in general. Like because you're talking, I'm not specifically talking to the patients. Like I'll sit in on patient appointments, so I'm like there. But like my biggest realization too is that a lot of these patients they have a deadline to life, like the diagnosed ones. Like And I think the biggest thing to actually recognize is like everyone says, this is super cliche, but everyone says like, be grateful for the present moment. All we really have is right now. Yeah. Like we have no idea what's going to happen in the next 10 minutes, in the next 5 years. So if you're unhappy, change it now. Like all we really have is this present moment. Like figure out how to be happy, right? Or like be grateful for what you have as well. Mm-hmm. And then like there's a Dr. Joe Dispenza. He says like, don't wait for a trauma or like a death or something to happen in your life to have that realization. It's like, because it's going to come to you like in your life. If you're like super unhappy, like some trauma is bound to happen to make you like wake up and be like, this is my only life. I'm in charge. I'm in control. Like, what do I want to do? You know, like what makes me happy? Like, let's shoot for that direction. No, totally. And it's all about being happy in the present moment and just like, because a lot of people like they'll work towards something and then be like, oh, I'll be happy when I get $1 million. I'll be happy when I get like so-and-so. And like, exactly. You're never, when you get there, you're not going to be happy unless you're happy right now. Totally. And like, you know, and something also with that is a lot of people will say, I'll go for that goal when I'm in a different situation, but I'm not good enough right now. Like, so they'll try to wait, but the truth of the matter is like you should go for things right now, because if you wait until you're a certain way, like number one, it may be different. Number two, like it may never happen. Like, you know, like you can never be perfect. Like if you're waiting for it to be perfect, you'll never it's not going to happen. Yeah, you'll never do it. Like there's so much with that. Like once I like, you know, get smart or read this book, then I'll do that. Or like, you know, like once I lose weight, I'll wear this swimsuit. Like it comes down to that. It's like, no, like fucking do the things you want to do that make you happy right now. Cause like we literally like, this is our one life, like, you know, one. But yeah. So I think that was a huge realization working with cancer patients for sure. And now like crisis counseling, end of life situations. So is that part of the genetic counseling? Like, no, it's really different. Yeah. Just separate. So you're just doing that. Yeah. Just to like, well, no. To be like completely authentic with my master's program, you have to do some volunteering. Okay. Like outside. So, but does it have to be crisis counseling? No. So like for a while, it's interesting because for a while I was trying to actually work with another organization, but like it was so hard to coordinate with them and they never got back to me. So I was kind of in this frenzy of like, oh my God, like I want to volunteer for an organization. I want to help. Like that's otherwise amazing. It's like, you're going to think it's like work, you know, like not work, but like shitty work. Like you don't want to be there. Yeah. No, whereas like if like this, it's like I'm doing this volunteering and it's like a big commitment. Like right now it's 6 hours per week for training and like I'm not getting paid. But I think I was telling you this earlier, like it's energetically like adding to my life so much that like you, so underrated. Like we were talking about like, you can talk about it yourself, but like when you have something that's energetically like adding to your life where you're excited to do it and you're like, it gets you out of bed. Like you don't need half the amount of sleep. Like you're just happy overall. It's like raising your vibration constantly. It's just like an addition. So I was like super excited, I guess, that this just happened I got an email one day and they were like, we'd love to have we need crisis counselors. It was like 30 hours of training, you know, 200-hour commitment minimum. And I was like, kind of, I want to do it though. Yeah, so. No, because you're passionate about it. And even like when you talk about it, like you can see your, I love it. You know, like you get that smile, your eyes flare up and it's like, it's great. It's great to see because the passion's what you need to be happy. Like we were talking about. Yeah. I think ultimately, like if you don't have passion, like what's going to drive you? Right. Yeah. No, like money can only drive you so far. I feel like. And then, at some point it's just not even like how much money's enough. Like, you know, it's not even worth it. Exactly. And I think if you can mix passion, if you can mix in passion, like personally, I think that money will come because you're so like where you're so passionate about it, like it's going to happen. No, definitely. And like we were talking about before, if it doesn't, then you learn from that. You know, you learn from everything that happens. You're not a victim to your like shitty circumstance that happened in your past. Like you have to learn from that and then like grow and move on. It's not like you have to freak out about it and then like lower your self-worth and like be stuck. Yeah, exactly. 'Cause that's when it gets dangerous, when you start to like feel bad about yourself. But like just touching off that, like when you do something you're passionate about, you get, even though you might be sleeping less, like you might be working harder, like energy wise, you just have so much more energy going through your day. Like,
And that's a beautiful thing when you find that, 'cause a lot of people never really get that.
Yeah,
like, at least I see that in life a lot, where people are just kind of going through the motions because they're not passionate about anything.
Yeah, right. Exactly. Yeah. Or like they haven't even been trained to like go find your passion. It's like, I feel like a lot of the Western world, like we're very like, everyone in society like is almost like trained to strive for materialistic and monetary goals, rather than focusing on like what makes you happy or what do you want to do in life,
and like that social status too.
Yeah, it's exactly. And like we were saying with Instagram and everything, like everything's convoluted, and so like to take a step back and be like, well, what's gonna bring the most joy to me? I feel like that, like even like emotional intelligence, I feel like all of this should be taught in schools. It's not taught at all. They don't talk about your emotions, and not to shit on school, because there's some great parts about school. I agree. Like, I think school's important. Yeah, I do too, but they should teach something about like your emotional, because like honestly some of the coolest people I know are people that are like the people I enjoy hanging out with the most are people that like they're not really on Instagram, like they're and like Barron, Barron Hilton, one of my favorite people in the world. He just wants to surf, hang out, smoke some tobacco sometimes. Sorry, Barron. But he's just himself, and he doesn't apologize for that, and it's so cool to see, and he's so energetic, and like another guy in my office here, Zach, he just like doesn't have social media. He just like just such a genuinely happy guy, and like just happy to be alive, and like I think it's contagious when you're around those people too. Totally. I think people are attracted to that too, because they're like, well, we want to just be like in this position, in this mindset. I think there's a big balance too with that too, is that like it's like if you're going to be on social media, just recognize, like we were talking about, to not base your self-worth and make it conditional on likes. Like if you are stuck in that trap, that's where it's dangerous, but it's hard not to stuck in that trap. I think like it's really big to, I don't know, like try to recognize that. I think that's huge. I think the first step is awareness as well. And then like stopping those thoughts. I think setting a limit, like 5 minutes a day or whatever, and not being like, honestly, right? Like, because I've even noticed now that I've become more aware with my mental state. Like I'll be crisis counseling. That helps you so much, I bet. Yeah. Like you have to be aware for sure. Of your emotional state. But like just even pulling up Instagram, like I'll start like being aware of my thoughts. I think meditation has helped with that too. I'll notice my mood going down as I spend more time on Instagram, which is ridiculous because it's like outside content. Nothing like in my life is actually bad happening. It's not like a tiger's coming at me, in like evolution, like anxiousness is like there's a reason, or like I'm in a starvation mode. No, like nothing actually bad is happening. I'm just looking at a screen, and changing my emotional state, and to give it that much control is ridiculous. It's ridiculous. It's like so bad. Yeah. And so, but I also think like it can be used to like emotionally express yourself, right, with creativity. Definitely. And like, so I mean, there's positives to it. There's some positives for sure. Yeah, there's some, but I heard they're like stopping, like they're testing in Canada right now where it doesn't show your followers, it doesn't show your likes. Yeah, how crazy is that? That would be amazing. Yeah. I would love that. Yeah. Like, yeah, that's going to be interesting. Yeah. Some people would be sick though. I almost think though, okay, my opinion with that though is like, what's the next thing to come then? I don't know. I think like with human nature, we weirdly have this like, there was like a Black Mirror episode on this. It's like we weirdly have this like. Is it a new one? I heard the new ones are trash. I don't know. I don't think it's new. I like never watch it. I just watched this one. But it's like we have this instinct to like almost like rate and judge based off like a physical or appearance, or like, I don't know. Oh, that's definitely true. Yeah. Yeah. And I think so, like, what's going to come, I think if Instagram does that, like, I feel like there's going to be something else. Like MySpace, Facebook, Instagram, like something's next. But I don't know. What was it I was going to say with that though? I think like, I don't know, if you look at that, I think I've heard this on a podcast where it's like obvious. Where like through evolution, we had this instinct to judge people in the tribe to know if they're trustworthy or not. So that's like where gossip came from, because it's like, if someone's like a traitor in the tribe, like we should know for survival. So it's like, we have that like weird instinct to like judge and gossip so that we know who's trustworthy. but like now it's like exploded to this like, it's not just to know if like they're a good friend. It's like for fun. It's like a fun activity to gossip. Yeah. Like that's ridiculous.
No,
I don't know.
Honestly, no. Someone told me something one time, and it was like this guy I really look up to. He's like, if you're gonna be on Instagram or on any social media, you should outflow more than you inflow.
Okay.
And it's like pretty much you should be putting out content, like if you want to, you know, more so than consuming all this different stuff that's just blasting in your face, like and that for me stuck, you know. It's like because honestly the only reason I'm on Instagram so much now is because I have to promote my fucking podcast, you know?
Right. But I think also like with that, like following accounts that inspire you and like lift you up, rather, like, and looking at their content, like consuming their content, rather than like content that like you know that you will put yourself against and
make
compare.
You feel bad.
Like comparison's always a trap, right? So
comparison's
it's like,
a thief of joy.
Yeah, exactly. So I think like having content that you're consuming that like isn't inspirational, that's also different, right? You're like surrounding yourself with like inspiring content so you can put yourself in a better position and outflow that as well.
Definitely. Right? But I don't do that.
Yeah, I know. Like no one does that. Everyone has way too many followers.
Honestly.
But like I think like there's some accounts that like I think there's one guy who like it's like the rule of 5. Like he says like the main 5 people you surround yourself with are going to be like how you know, act in life and where you're going to be success wise and whatever.
Definitely.
Which I think is valid, right?
Very valid.
That's who you're trusting and taking in from all the
who
time.
you're listening to, who's like you're talking like all that.
So I think like he only follows like 5 accounts that he's like, these are trustworthy, like inspirational people. Fuck the rest. Like,
so much respect.
He has like a ton of followers. He's, you know, he's like, no, I'm a control freak. Like, why is that a bad thing?
That's great though.
Yeah.
That's kind of how you have to be. You got to keep your circle tight.
Yeah. But then I think with that too, you can't like, it's also like, you want to be careful with judgment, right? Like you can't, I think like judging others is hard too, because you're basing your judgment and perception off your own past, but like, and your environment and your genetics and the way you grew up, and they have their own past, you know, their own perception, their own environment. So it's like, I think with that comes empathy too. Like you kind of understand everyone has a different path and perception in life.
Do you find yourself doing that when you meet somebody?
Judging?
Like being empathetic right off the bat?
Oh, no, I think it takes time and like training. I think,
definitely.
I think that realization, so I took Buddhism in college, right? And I think one of the main teachings is like to understand that like no one's perception is the same. So it's like they almost argue that nothing's reality because no one can see something the exact same way. And there's like way more into that, but I think that like epiphany hit because I'm like, like even like colors, like you see pink completely different than me, even though we like can kind of see it in a similar way.
Well, I'm colorblind, so.
All right.
I'm playing. No, I see it, but is that a thing? Do we all see different?
Well, I mean, like it's all depending on perception too. Like, okay, this is a better example. So say you have like, you were bullied in middle school, right? And your bully in middle school looks a certain way. So you meet someone like 10 years later that looks exactly like that person. You're already perceiving them to be a shitty person, right? Because of your past experience. And obviously, like, you get to know them and you can even be like, well, like, at first I thought you were going to be a terrible person. Yeah. It's all about, like...
Is that more subconscious?
Yeah, I think so, for sure. I think until you're, like, a monk.
Until you're a monk.
Like, right? Like, I think if everyone had that realization all the time, like, why would there be war? Everyone would be like, oh, like, I get it. You have a different opinion. Like, I get because your past is different. You know?
Yeah, nobody does that.
Yeah,
but it's the truth though.
Yeah, yeah. But I mean, it's harder said than done. I think like how much of our brain is like subconscious thought, you know, going all day.
It's got to be a lot of it.
Like I think it's like 90% or something, and it's like repetitive thoughts. So it's like how can you actually tap in and control that?
I believe because even for me sometimes like I'll start judging somebody for absolutely no reason, and I'm like, whoa, like what is that? Like why am I doing that?
I mean, I think right.
And it's just taking like that deep, like it's taking a second to notice it too.
Yeah, like, see, that's what first step is awareness. And then once you notice, you can do what you want with that information. But noticing is the hardest part, I think.
Yeah, I think so too.
But like going off that, I think a lot of like so say like you take a bad experience, and like, so that relates with experiences of how you're gonna emotionally handle any experience that happens in your present day. So like, say you have, this is like a common example, say you have a bad breakup, then like a lot of people will be like, well, all men or all women are bad. Like they'll go into this generalization.
Yeah.
So like oftentimes our subconscious thoughts are just like habits and like patterns from emotional experiences we've had in the past. So like a lot of situations and the way we handle them are because of things that's happened in the past, which is also like a good learning lesson.
And is there a way to like get rid of those?
I think like
subconscious thoughts, emotions, like what happened to you way back, you know?
Yeah, I mean, there's like so many books and like therapists and psychologists that go into that. I think the main thing like that I've learned is to like not be a victim of your past. So like the main thing is to let go. And a lot of people like argue like just let go of the past, like let go. But I think like also you have to learn. Like you have to learn from your past. That's why it happened, in my opinion. Yeah. And then once you learn, it's easier also to let go. And so that you're not like, you're learning, but you're not like, I mean, that's like also a fine line too. Because you can't generalize from that experience that everything's going to be that way. So learning in the fact that like I emotionally responded this way and this is how this happened. Now I'm going to move on from that and not expect everything to be that way, but like have a lesson, right? That makes sense.
No. I got you.
Yeah.
It's just like, I don't know a good way to like, seeing a therapist, you think like take a look at, how do you take like a real look at your past and be like, okay, I act this way in this situation because of what I went through back then, you know? Because I'm sure there's some shit I got that.
I have after I started going into it, especially this past year, and I'm like, whoa, like there's so much stuff like that I do habitually because of like situations in my past. And it's like crazy to think, because I'm like, oh, like when I was 5 this happened and now it's shaping the way I think about this.
Is like even that young?
Yeah especially that young, because you're like you're so subconscious in that, you know, like things affect you so much. So but I think like awareness again, like when you go into a situation to try to like, if you have an emotionally heightened response, to analyze that and be like, well, what could have caused this? I think meditation is a big part of it, and visualization, like hypnosis.
You ever done any hypnosis?
Yeah, actually. Woo! Yeah, I think that's
How was that?
Well, so the hypnosis, it wasn't.
What does that look like?
So it's not like the like at the fair where they're like, move your arm, like totally different. Yeah. It's kind of it's putting you, the way I did it is like they're putting you into a state of like a mental state where you get when you're in meditation. So like it's like beta waves or alpha waves, I'm forgetting right now, but it's like your brain waves that you're in your subconscious mind. You're not like conscious of what's going on. And then they kind of lead you into the situation where they'll say like an age or something, and they'll be like, go back to that time. And then it's crazy like what memories come up, because the memories that come up are like ingrained in you, and you realize like the fact that I remembered it means that it had an impact on me.
100%.
And so then you're like, whoa, like that situation kind of shaped the way that I'm like acting in this situation now.
Like, can you give an example? If not,
let me think.
That's some personal stuff. So I feel you.
Yeah, it's kind of it's pretty personal.
No sweat.
I can kind of think of one though.
That just sounds so heavy. Like,
I think okay. I mean, yeah, I don't know.
Oh, you're good. Nah, you're good. I just like curious about what that would.
I mean, like, so I'll give like an example of like, because then you analyze that for us, right? And then you have people and kids who grew up with like rape and like robbery, and like that was like what they grew up with. Like imagine that affecting their, you know.
Yeah.
So
that's way
like, so like the obvious examples, like if you have like a really traumatic, you know, experience, like, okay, so say like getting really deep, but like say a woman like she did experience rape when she was younger, and she like pushed it out of her mind subconsciously, because like a lot of humans do that. They like want to push trauma away. So she even like forgot about it, but now she's 30 and she's like doesn't understand why she can't get into a functional relationship or doesn't trust men or whatever. So like she goes into this hypnosis and she's like, oh my God, like this happened, right? Then it's like, whoa, like this is shaping a lot of like my past 30 years.
Yeah.
And so I think like working with that, I don't know, that's an extreme example, but
no, but I feel like
that's
even
very, like getting bullied or
very real example.
Yeah,
and like it percolates in your present day life.
Totally, exactly.
Some shit you went through when you were young and like.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're getting deep on this Saturday afternoon. Oh my god. But yeah, like, so hypnosis, like, what? How do you get into that? Like being a hypnotist?
Yeah, I don't know.
That's crazy.
I know. Yeah, I don't know.
But that worked for you?
Yeah, I think there's a ton of tools that you can work with. I think hypnosis, meditation.
What kind of meditation do you do?
A lot of guided. So like I'm really into actually visualizations. I think it's easier for me. I think it's easier for me to sit there and visualize something and then come up with epiphanies almost, or just calm my mind down in that way rather than sitting. It's really hard for me. I think hard for everyone in the world right now.
Yeah.
To sit there in silence for longer than 5 minutes or even 3 minutes with no thoughts, right? That's fucking hard. It's so hard. Yeah. Like you're bound to be like, I have a scratch, like at least, or like, oh my God.
Something like my eye itches.
Yeah, or like, oh my God, my future, like what do I have to do today? Or like, oh my God, the thing I said earlier today, like some thought comes in.
Yeah.
And so having like a visualization where you're like focusing on like a certain thing in your mind is way easier for me in meditation.
Like what kind of stuff are you like what do they have you because I've never heard of that kind
of really meditation. Okay, there's a lot of like, so like have you heard of like chakra clearing? So like that type where you're like visualizing like different colors on your body and you see like a bright light coming and like clearing, you know.
Okay,
or like even like a lot, like there was a crazy one I did where it had me, this one's weird, so like you're supposed to visualize going into your heart, and then while you're in your heart, like there's this really crazy one, so you're like in your heart and then you're supposed to visualize your future self at like 10 years from now.
I love that.
And you visualize this future self coming up to you and like giving you a hug and saying like, it's all going to be fine. Like, don't worry. It's all going to be fine. All these small problems, they don't mean shit.
That's
like,
fucking deep.
And then you're supposed to visualize like what your future self is doing, where they're working, who they're surrounded by, like, and you're supposed to be like your happiest self in 10 years. And so it's like that visualization, I think, was specifically on like defining what future you want for yourself. But like, yeah, it's like almost like you're like yourself is giving you advice, but you're coming up with it. But
that's
it's like
such a healthy practice.
Yeah, right. But it's not like I do that every day.
Nah, but like, still, like we need like that's some shit that should be like a class in school,
right? I mean, I totally agree.
That's such a healthy practice.
Yeah. I think like with school, like especially because of the like there's so much competition, like getting straight A's, like C's used to be average, now C's are like you're failing. So like now, like, you know, this causes an Adderall epidemic, like everything, like suicide is so high, like because of school. So I think like why are we not incorporating these techniques, like these emotional intelligence like classes or like meditational classes where it's like, because that's showing how strong your mental state can be. If you're like taking your life or like doing drugs because like you can't handle the stress and you have to live up to expectations, like fuck.
No, I
there
feel
should
that.
be some meditation.
And like Malcolm Gladwell, do you ever read any Malcolm Gladwell?
Mm-mm.
He talks about he's a great author. If you haven't read it, read him. He's great. But he talks about like analytical intelligence versus practical intelligence, which is like analytical is like the straight A's, like math, like you know, physicists, like kind of shit. But practical is like something that it's like a lot of people are just born with, where it's like you know, you can just talk, you can work a room, like, and he gives so many examples about that, and like, but that's a skill you can learn. Yeah, totally. You know, and like even with you with the crisis counseling, like that's that is helping your practical intel. Like you are so far ahead of so many people your age because of that. You know what I mean? Like, but totally. For it, so you can communicate. You know, like when to say this, when to say that. And like some people just don't know how to do that. Like I don't know how to do a second derivative, like you know what I mean? Like, but you can learn it. I just feel like that's something that is important, like totally to living, and like needs to be taught better.
So that's actually something it was Corey's podcast, I think, when he talked about, I guess this is kind of on a tangent, but he talked about how like, so if you should trust a doctor when he says like this is your diagnosis, he kind of talked about, I'm not trying to put words in his mouth, but what I got from it was that like you take their advice and like the tests and like this is what you have, and then you go to like a holistic naturopath, naturopath or whatever, right? So I think with that too, like that's huge because a lot of like Western medicine, we're focused on dealing with trauma, and like we're great in dealing with trauma. You come in with a huge gash in your leg, like we can fix that. We got it down. You're not gonna die. But it's hard when it comes down to mental health, when it comes down to a long-term ailment. Like a lot of like Western medicine and like in general med school doesn't really teach how the body can heal itself. Like they're taught a ton about drugs and like the new technology and surgery and stuff. And so like with that, like I'm sure there's schools out there that do.
Yeah.
But I think with that, like if you're diagnosed with something that can be worked on with diet and nutrition and exercise and mental health as well, that's a huge factor. And like I totally agree with him in that fact. Like you should like go search that out too, because how many studies are now coming out too, like the mind and body connection. Like if you're depressed, your body's not going to fight for you. Like you're not going to get better. You're just not going to get better. And so
that's not focused on in like the medical.
Yeah, I don't think it's focused in med school. Even like being a bio major and like learning like the stuff we did. Like I had a few teachers here and there that were like, you know, like here's the drug. This isn't like the only answer, or like it's important to know that like if you're diagnosed, it doesn't mean that you can't get out of it. Like things like that. But like a lot of it is focused on just like the science behind it and like what we can do to correct it, like a Band-Aid fix.
Right.
We're often taught like Band-Aid fixes and like, but with that, it's like, what's the root cause? Like, I don't think that's
like you're
really
treating
taught.
the symptom, not the root cause.
Exactly. And then it's just going to escalate.
Yeah, no, definitely. But just bouncing off what you were saying about Corey's podcast, he had the most severe form of colitis, which is like, so tough on the body. Like it's almost like he's kind of on his deathbed almost at a certain point. And he just was like I love him so much because he's always talked about like I'm all like you can cure yourself with food, like blah, 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 blah. But when it came down to it, like he really said, fuck it. Like, I'm going to do it. And what he did was, he talked about on the podcast. He's like, I need to get out of the hospital because like there's just, I'm surrounded by people dying, like moaning, like beep, beep. Like, and he's like, I had to get out of there. I had to get to an environment where my mind was right. So I started watching things that made me happy, like surrounded by people who believed in me that I was going to get better. And he's like, that was the biggest thing for me.
It's huge.
Not the drugs. Like it's the mental, it's the mental, emotional kind of like, and that's such a big impact on your body too.
Yeah. I know. Yeah, exactly. Like there's actually, and then if you think about it too, like a lot of people will say like, okay, so we know that lowering your stress is good for health, but if you think about it, like especially like this is when it comes down to like whether or not you believe in like energy healing and stuff. People are very like, no, like that's like way too much energy healing.
Fuck with all that.
Whatever. Yeah, but like so like, but what's interesting is when you analyze it scientifically, like cortisol is the hormone that's produced when you're anxious, right? You have to store that in your body somewhere, like physically. So like for me, like when I'm anxious, like my shoulders get really tense. So that's literally a direct example of how your mental state is affecting your physical state. And so like how can you argue that like it's not connected, right? And like I get like there's a lot of complication with that, and like sometimes like it is really hard to say that like you can heal yourself based off just mental state or whatever. But I do think it's a huge factor. And cortisol, like in general, being in your body will lower your immune system. It'll like stop your healing, create more mutations genetically. Like it's so bad. So that's all directly mental state. Like that's like, how is that not taught, Yeah,
I know. It's crazy to me too.
But yeah, I thought that was really interesting. Like there's this guy named Sean Stevenson podcast.
Why have I heard that name?
Probably he's a podcast called The Model Health Show. It's really cool.
Okay. Anyway,
it's good. It's
good.
But
you're a big podcast girl, then.
Huge podcast. I told you every other day to work. He talked about literally how he like got pretty much a death sentence. Like the doctor was like, you're gonna live for 3 months, and he was like, hell no, fuck that, I'm gonna live longer. And like left and healed himself.
Such a mindset. It's like you either take that route or you're like, fuck, I'm dead.
Right?
Like, yeah. I feel like that's.
And it's hard working with patients for me that are super hopeless. They're like, well, I'm going to die anyways. Like they're really at the depressed stage. And like, that's what's hard. Cause I'm like, no, like you can fight. Like,
and if you're going to go out, you might as well go out.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah. I know, like
swinging,
with
like
fucking,
trying.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And in general, that's going to bring you way more happiness with the rest of your life you do have.
Exactly.
Rather than sitting there and like twiddle, like, you know, like waiting. Like that's so sad. That's so sad.
Yeah. Yeah. That is pretty depressing.
Yeah.
But like, how do you handle a patient like that? Like, because you just got to stay positive, right? Like,
I think like, well, so I mean, obviously I still have to get my master's for this.
Yeah.
But I think like what I've observed so far with genetic counselors is that like, again, providing that glimpse of hope. It all comes down to like, you can have a better future, right? Mm-hmm. Here's a treatment plan I'm going to give you because of these genes or like what stage you're in, whatever. Like focus on that. Focus on the future, the beautiful future you could have, right? And then like with that, like I've seen patients literally call genetic counselors up and like 5 years later and be like, hey, I'm just checking in. Like they're friends. Like a lot of the patients we have, they become kind of like friends and like they check in, they like update you, you know, and it's really cool. So I think that's also why I was so drawn to that profession. Because it's so much more than just being like, here are your genes, or like a lot of science is like,
you're really making a difference in their life.
You're mixing it in with.
So how did you like find that profession? Like what led you to that?
So I had no idea what I wanted to do in college. All I knew was like, I like science. I was like, I like my classes. Some sucked, obviously. But some were like, literally I'd leave the classroom, like the lecture, and be so like overwhelmed with like how amazing I thought the lecture was. That's what kept me going. And so I kind of like went through, so I did research my junior year with rats.
With rats?
Mice. Yeah. And I was like, okay, so because for a while, so the research I did was we were trying to find, our lab was trying to find a non-addictive opioid. And we were in the opioid crisis. We still are, right? So it's like, 100%. That was really cool research. But I think like what I didn't realize is how non-social research can be. Mm-hmm. So I was in a room for 6 hours with like red light, because the mice can't see red light, with mice, just me, for 6 hours a day. And I was like, I am losing my mind.
Yeah, that's
like
taxing.
I seriously would talk to the mice. Like I thought I was like insane. Not really, but like I would talk to the mice. And it's kind of sad too, because like they have to die in the end, like they're research mice. It's all bad. But not to shit on my lab. I love my lab. But so I kind of realized like I don't want to do research. So my goal was to mix science with human interaction, kind of like. Mm-hmm. That was my main goal. I also do like I wanted to help people. So then I kind of was like, oh well, I'll go into like biotech marketing or something. Yeah. Because that's what my mom did actually. And then I don't know, like I think one day like a genetic counselor came in. It was my senior year, first semester, and she was like, "This is what I do." But she was actually prenatal. So what she did was she worked on. So this is the other part of genetic counseling. Like she would tell mothers. If their fetus was like predisposed to a certain disease. So like I was like super inspired by that, because there's now tests out that like you can even help the mother know if their child may be born with autism, for instance. And so like with that, a lot of kids will have autism but not be diagnosed till they're like 10 years old. So the parents are like, I have no idea how to parent this child. Like, what's going on? What's wrong? And then, like, divorces happen, fights happen. You know, all this could be avoided. The child isn't parented right, whatever. Right. So my inspiration with that was like, if the parent knew how to parent the child better, then you know, like life would be way easier for a lot of families. So, anyways, that was my initial inspiration. And then from there, when I graduated, I didn't have like enough classes for that, but I've been like. That's why it's taking me so long to get my master's. But I ended up in cancer, which I had no idea. Like I was going to do prenatal. And now I'm like confused. I'm like, do I do cancer or prenatal? I have no idea what I'm going to end up in. But
But yeah, you got some time to figure it out.
Yeah, some time, 3 years.
Yeah. No, but that's great that you found, like, because you're 23, right?
Yeah.
That's such a young, you already know what you want to do. Like, that's a beautiful
I know,
thing.
I think, like, also it's helpful to be in the hospital with the genetic counselors, because, like, right now I'm in the stage of waiting. Like, patience and acceptance is my mantra right now, because, like, I'm in this...
Patience and acceptance.
I'm in this, like, state where I have to, I just took the GRE. I have to apply still. Like, I'm in this, like, kind of waiting period for a year. And I think if I was in another job, I would have just, like, given up. Because it's, like, such a long-term goal. It's, like, so far away that you're like, oh, like, I don't want to go through all this work. I could do something else, and make money, whatever.
Yeah.
But I think working with the genetic counselors and seeing, like, what I'm going to be, or, like, what I could be, and, like, seeing the impact they make on patients directly is keeping me going. I'm like, no, I really want to do this.
Seen that 10-year future self too.
Yeah,
That's
right. Tunnel vision. Yeah.
All right, so we done damn near an hour now.
Oh wow.
Yeah, that one flew by.
Gotta
start wrapping up a little bit. But question for you: what's that, like, that 10-year person you're talking about? Like, what does she look like?
Whoa.
Like, what do you see her in?
I think, like, I guess,
like, where are you gonna be, like, blissfully happy? Like,
are we talking about specifics, or just, like,
you could answer it however you want?
Okay,
girl.
I think overall, my main goals are to, like, help as many people as I can, like, make a positive impact on as many people's lives as I can. And I think also just maintaining, like, self-awareness and, like, growth and, like, within myself constantly, endlessly, because I think that is what brings me the most happiness, and, like, helping others, like, grow too.
Exactly.
That's all. I don't know where. I have no idea what I'm going to be doing.
If you're not growing, you're dying, though.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. So, damn.
Yeah.
Natalie Samson, thanks for coming, girl.
Thank you.
Appreciate
for having me.
You killed that.